Hey everyone, I am thrilled to dive into a track that had been brewing in the studio for a while. It's sort of a progressive slash alternate house music track. From the initial beats to the final tweaks, I'm going to take you through each element that I included in this song, revealing the intricacies and choices that shaped this piece of music. So let's hit play and explore the track together. I wanted to start with a rhythmic pad as my bass, and Logic has some really nice rhythmic synths, so I settled on this one in the ES2 plugin called Aurora Borealis. I wanted a somewhat melancholic sound, so I drew in these chords. We've got E minor, D major, G major, and D major but inverted. Let's hear how that sounds. I actually left the effects plugins that it came with because I like how it sounds already. Then I bounced it to an audio track because I think that audio just gives me a little more room to mess around, whereas MIDI is a bit more rigid to work with, at least in Logic. To the audio track, I added a little bit of distortion to give it a bit more fullness. So I'll play the pad with and without the distortion so you can hear the difference. It's subtle, but I think that distortion gives it just a bit more body and character. Finally, I added a compressor and sidechained the kick. I'll show what I did with the kick later in the video, but for now, just know that by sidechaining the kick, it causes the audio in the pad to duck just slightly every time the kick plays, allowing the kick to punch through and give the pad more of a pulsing sound that you tend to hear in electronic music. So let's take a listen with and without the compressor. Again, very subtle, but gives it a bit more of a dynamic character. I wanted to incorporate some found sounds. Something that sounds kind of mechanical, just to move away from conventional drum samples. And I found this clicking sound on Splice that I think works perfectly. Here's the dry sound, which I put on the 2nd and 16th note of every measure. Placing the percussion on the 2nd and 16th note of a 4/4 beat gives it a little bit more groove, syncopation, adds some rhythmic variation, creates some counterpoints to the other elements in the song, and just makes it a little more danceable, I think. I put on an 8th note dotted delay with a decent amount of feedback, which gives it a consistent percussive sound. This creates tension against the underlying 4/4 signature, which makes it sound a bit more interesting, in my opinion. And here's how it sounds so far. Let's hear how that sounds with the Aurora Borealis pad. I found this hi-hat loop on Splice that I really liked, so I added that in next. Here's how it sounds on its own. And here's how it sounds with the click and the pad. Next, I added a clap, which I panned slightly to the left because I'm going to layer another clap over that, which I'll pan to the right. This gives the clap a bit more width within the mix. So here it is on its own. And with just a bit of compression. The compressor gives it a bit more of a snap. So here's what we've got so far. So here's the second clap, which I've got pitched to the right. This one is a little bit more high-pitched and noisy. So here it is on its own. And here are both clap sounds together. You hear how it has a bit more width in the mix. Now I want to introduce one of my favorite elements, which is a mechanical percussion sample. And I think it sounds awesome with that click that I showed you earlier. So here's the sample on its own. Shout out to the recycling pack on Splice for making this sample. It's awesome. I also use this sample to create a percussive fill that leads into the section where the clap comes in. Let's listen to that again. To do this, all I did was cut out everything except for the first eighth note of the sample and then just reversed it. Let's hear how that sounds with all of the other elements we've discussed so far. Nice, starting to groove. I added a tambourine later on in the track to give it more high frequency presence and add a little bit of texture to the drums. Here it is on its own. I think it adds a little bit more of a groove as well. I added just a little bit of reverb to give it some atmosphere. On top of that, I put a compressor which sidechains to the kick to duck the volume just a bit every time the kick plays. Let's give it a listen. You see how that compressor is causing the volume to duck every time the kick note would come through? Which is a perfect segue into my explanation of the kick. And sorry to disappoint you, but the kick is very straightforward and simple. Here it is on its own. Just a nice, simple, punchy kick sample. And on top of that, I put on a compressor just to give it even more punch. The last thing I did is put all of the drums together in a track stack. This is a summing stack in Logic. Not only does this enable me to control the volume of all of the drum sounds at once, I can also put in some effects that would affect all of the drum sounds as well. In this case, all I did was add a compressor to kind of glue all of the drum sounds together. I used Logic's classic drum preset and then just adjusted my parameters from there. I like using presets as a way to get me towards the sound that I want and then making adjustments to my liking. It's just a lot faster for my workflow personally. So I'll play all of the drums together with and without the compression so you can hear the difference. Let's hear the drums together with the synth. Now let's talk about the bass. I use the pressure drop bass preset in Logic's Alchemy plugin and played in a staccato sort of bass line that builds tension as it progresses. On top of this bass line, I layered in a sub-bass preset from Alchemy as well. This layer has the exact same notes from the bass line that I played for you a minute ago. I don't always layer my basses, but in this instance, I felt like the pressure drop bass needed a little bit more fullness and something to fill in the lower frequencies. So I'll play the pressure drop bass and we'll toggle on and off the sub bass so you can hear the difference. Very subtle, but again, I think it fills in nicely. Then I created a track stack containing both bass tracks. Since track stacks create a bus, I wanted to add some compression, which side chains to the, you guessed it, the kick. This helps prevent the kick from being muddied by the bass within the mix. Let's give the song a listen with all of our elements in place thus far. In the bridge of the song, I wanted to add some percussion, but something that strayed away from all of the other drum elements just a little bit. So I thought it would be cool to add a breakbeat. I got this sample from Splice, and it's just a topper, so it doesn't actually have any kick in it, which is perfect because if I want to play it with the kick, they won't clash. So here is the breakbeat on its own. I thought the high frequencies were a bit harsh, so I EQ'd them out a little bit. I'll play the sample with and without the high frequencies. I think it sounds a bit more subdued. The element which really ties the track together is this vocal sample that I got from Splice. Using vocal samples from Splice seems to be somewhat discouraged in the producer community, but I liked it, so sue me. So here's the original vocal sample.
One more time, please stay here. One more time, I need you.
Now, of course, this sample had already been pitched and time stretched within Splice to fit the BPM of my song as well as the key. I chopped up the sample into the pieces that I liked the most. I added a bit of chorus to give it some stereo width.
One more time, please stay here.
To make the vocals a little more interesting and to emphasize certain parts, I duplicated the vocal sample and layered it on top of the original. And on this duplicated sample, I pitched the vocals down by a full octave and added some distortion. Let's hear them together.
One more time, please stay here. One more time, I need you.
Then I put both of these vocal samples into a track stack. From the track stack, I created a send to a bus with echo and reverb. I like sending my effects to a bus because the bus enables for some parallel processing where you can blend the dry signal with the wet more easily, achieving your desired sonic characteristics without affecting the sound of the original track too much. For the delay, I've got 1/8 dotted notes for some syncopation with quite a bit of feedback. Wet signal turned all the way up. Here's how that sounds.
One more time, please stay here.
Using Logic's Chromaverb plugin, I put on a little bit of reverb, tiny bit of decay, but wet signal all the way up as well. Let's hear it together.
One more time, please stay here. One more time, I need you.
I wanted to add another synth element, so I found this cool preset in Logic called the Cloudy Plucked Synth. So what I did is I played in the same root notes as the Aurora Borealis pad, but I used Logic's Arpeggiator plugin. I really liked this simple chord groove preset. And Logic has this feature where you can record to MIDI. So when you play your notes, it will actually record the individual MIDI notes that are arpeggiated. So let's take a listen. I really like that it has sort of that slowly opening and closing filter. It gives it a little more movement, and this arpeggiator preset gives it a little bit more of a groove and movement against the 4/4 time signature. Then I bounced this to an audio track, again, because I just prefer to work with audio. And the only effect I added is a compressor, again, sidechained to the kick to allow the kick to punch through a bit more and create that pulsing effect that we tend to hear in electronic music. So I'll play it with and without the compressor so you can hear the difference. You can hear it subtly ducking in volume every time the kick would be playing through. So let's take a listen to this synth with all of the other elements in the song thus far.
One more time. One more time.
As I arranged the track, I realized it needed a little bit of ear candy or some other sort of atmospheric noise to make you feel like you're in a certain place and time. I can't really explain why, but I felt like this sample I got of people talking in a large group in like a bar or something somewhere really fit the mold. I put it at the beginning of the song and faded it out right as the vocals come in. Once I had my main elements in place, I began to arrange the track, adding little things here and there, all of which I've discussed in this video. I also automated certain parameters like wet signals of delay and reverb, high and low filter settings, which all create points of tension and release throughout the song. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it useful and that you learned something. For now, I'll leave you with the full track, which is called Need You, and it's streaming on all platforms now. And I left a link in the description.
One more time, I need you. One more time, stay here. One more